Hi there. My name's Anita Daher. I'm a Canadian children's book author living in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Uh, Last week I began reading from my more recent novel for middle grades and junior high called Forgetting How to Breathe. I started doing that because classes had been interrupted everywhere, and I knew of at least one class that was in the middle of reading this book, so I decided to read from that. After 4 chapters, though, I switched and moved on to something else. My brand new book that's just been released but not yet launched. It won't be officially launched until we can all gather again safely, but it is on its way out to stores, so you're welcome to order it or reserve it through a library. It'll be there. It's a young adult novel called You Don't Have to Die in the End. And yesterday I read, so that was last week as well, You Don't Have to Die in the End. And then yesterday I read a first chapter from my Junior Canadian Rangers series called Racing for Diamonds. Junior Canadian Rangers is a real organization, a real youth organization in Canada in remote and northern communities. JCRs for short are really, they become community leaders. They help out in their communities and provide really positive role models, and they learn all kinds of wonderful skills, traditional skills, on the land skills. And so it was a pleasure to write this series. This is a series from a few years ago. But one thing I didn't explain yesterday is the reason for my outfit. Yes, I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, sometimes known as Winterpeg, Manitoba, but we're well into spring here. It's beautiful blue skies and sunshine out there, 1 degree Celsius and getting warmer. We should be well above zero by the weekend. But yes, this rather warm get-up is just in honor of the Junior Canadian Rangers. This is what they wear. Junior Canadian Rangers, not the Ranger leaders. The Ranger leaders wear red. But JCRs have this nice little ball cap and toques. There's toques for colder weather as well. I just didn't feel like wearing my toque indoors. And also this nice logo on the sweatshirt. And this outfit and a few other items were presented to me when I went up to Yellowknife when I was researching this book, and I was able to speak with a number of rangers, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. So yesterday I read from Racing for Diamonds, the first chapter, and today I'm going to read from Poachers in the Pingos. Poachers in the Pingos has a different main character than Racing for Diamonds. Racing for Diamonds was about Jazz, and we learned a little bit about her interactions with Collie, a blue-eyed Dene boy. Well, Collie is the main character in this story. Jazz and Collie go up to Tuktoyaktuk, where Collie's uncle is a ranger leader of the Junior Canadian Rangers there. So I'll read from chapter 1. This will be very fun for me. I haven't read from this book in a very long time, but I enjoy cold reads, and I hope you enjoy being read to. You and him got something in common, hey? Collie jumped. He'd been watching a raven in a large cage beside the front desk of the Aviary Hotel and Tea House. The cage door was open, and he was wondering if it was supposed to be. He hadn't noticed the man come up behind him. What do you mean? Collie asked, although he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. He just wanted to hear him say it. The man was wearing big green gumboots and a bulky sweater. As he moved behind the counter, he spat a glob of grape-smelling bubblegum into a garbage bin. His hair was brown with flecks of gray, and his eyes were small. To Collie, they looked cold, like birds' eyes. He'd never really liked birds. They were something you shot and put in a pot. He'd never thought of them as pets. The blue eyes, kid. Are you Métis? No, I'm Dene, Collie said. He was so tired of always having to explain. The Métis were descendants of Aboriginal people who had married French, Scots, and English settlers. Blue eyes were not unusual if you were Métis, but he was Dene, descended from a long line of First Nations people. Really? Guess you're both freaks of nature then. Not that it's a bad thing. The man erupted in laughter as he began tapping on a computer keyboard, and Collie began a slow boil. It was true that Dene didn't usually have blue eyes, but in his family it happened every few generations. It wasn't a big deal in Destiny where he lived. People were used to it. But this was Tuktoyaktuk, a hamlet on the shore of the Arctic Ocean, 700 miles northwest of Destiny. Oh, come on, lighten up, kid! The man leaned over the counter and gave him what was probably meant to be a friendly punch in the arm. Who wants to be the same as everyone else? That would be pretty boring. As Collie rubbed his arm, the phrase, "Respect your elders," ran through his mind. It was something that had been drummed into his head for as long as he could remember. But sheesh, sometimes it was a pretty difficult thing to do. Respect was something they talked about a lot in his JCR patrol. JCR was short for Junior Canadian Rangers. There were JCR patrols in communities all across northern Canada. Collie had been a member since he turned 12 and been made Master Corporal just before his 13th birthday, something that had at first irked Jazz, his fellow JCR, but that was before they became friends. There was a sudden flurry of activity behind him as Jazz entered the foyer. "Come on, Collie, I want to explore." They'd arrived in Tuk, which was what most people called Tuktoyaktuk, by airplane that morning for a visit with Collie's Uncle Norbert. "Just a minute," Collie said. "I'm getting something to eat." He handed the unpleasant man some money and accepted a tightly wrapped egg sandwich in return. Outside, Collie handed Jazz half his sandwich, and they munched as they set off up the long main street toward the harbor. It was like heading for the edge of the world. Tuk sat on a peninsula that was a mostly flat slab of land jutting out like a thumb into the ocean. The slab was actually more like a patch of mud that someone wearing rubber boots had jumped through. There were lakes and marshy bits everywhere. There were also hills and lots of flowers, shrubs, and moss, but no trees. Collie knew this kind of northern land without trees was called tundra. They'd passed the last tree just after they'd flown over Inuvik, the next closest town to the south, but still 100 miles away. There had to be trees somewhere, though. Driftwood, looking like bleached dinosaur bones, littered the beaches up and down the coast as far as Collie could see. Maybe the wood had floated up the Mackenzie River, just like the barges that brought supplies from the south. "There it is!" Jazz cried. "What?" "The caribou!" Collie squinted, peering toward the distant rocks. "I think you're seeing things." "Am not. It's there. Everyone says so." Collie's uncle had told him that the name Tuktoyaktuk meant "looks like a caribou" in the Inuvialuit language. It came from a legend about how once upon a time a caribou waded into the water and became petrified. To Collie, looking for a caribou shape in clumps of rocks was kind of like squinting at clouds. You saw what you wanted to see. When they'd gone as far as they could possibly go, Collie and Jazz kicked off their sneakers and dipped their toes into the ocean. "It's freezing!" Jazz cried. "It sure doesn't feel like July." "You're just soft. I dare you to put your whole foot in." "No way. I dare you to put both your feet in." "I will if you will." Collie nodded toward a couple of young kids farther down the beach who were running in and out of the water in shorts and long-sleeved t-shirts, splashing each other. They sure weren't soft. He laughed as Jazz made a face and stuck out her tongue at him. It was easy to forget people like the man at the hotel when you were just kicking around with a pal. Except now he was thinking about him again. Darn! "What did you think of that creep at the hotel?" Collie asked. Jazz shrugged. "It's obvious that you don't like him." She paused to skip a rock and watch it sink. "Question is, why?" "He was being a jerk." "Like how?" "Did you see that raven with the blue eyes? The guy said we were both freaks of nature." "That's so mean." "Maybe he just didn't think before he opened his mouth. I do that sometimes." "No kidding." Jazz gave him a shove. "I don't know why you're so touchy anyway. Blue eyes makes you special." Collie sighed. "Yeah, that's what the creep said." "There, see? He didn't mean to bug you." "Maybe not." He left the beach and started walking back up the main road toward the building where the town council took care of all their business. Just after they had arrived that morning, Uncle Norbert had gone out on a patrol, but he told them that he would be back right after lunch and that he would meet them there. They turned at the sound of crunching gravel, and a tall, lean, blond man wearing a black scuba diving suit with yellow stripes sailed past them on a skateboard with a sail. "That's pretty weird," Collie said. Jazz shrugged. As they walked along the gravel road, they passed an old schooner called Lady of Lords that looked permanently parked on shore. Next to the old ship there was a white wooden church with a green roof and green trim, and a cemetery that looked out over the sea. "I don't get why you're so touchy anyway," Jazz said. "Why do you get so mad when people talk about your eyes?" Collie realized he was gritting his teeth. "I'm not mad." "Sound mad to me." He sighed. "Fine, I'll tell you. But then you have to drop it." "I promise," Jazz said. "I think my family's cursed." "Did someone come along and put a hex on you or something?" She grinned and waggled her fingers in the air like she was doing some sort of magical spell. "Stop it, Jazz, I'm not kidding." She lowered her hands. "Sorry. What do you mean?" "Blue-eyed boys in our family die young and in terrible accidents." That doesn't mean your family is cursed. He shrugged. Maybe not, but he felt a painful lump in his throat and tried to swallow it. It happened again. Last month, my cousin Junie was fishing back in Fort Chip. A freak storm came up. They figure his boat capsized, and he didn't have his life jacket on. He died? Yeah. Oh, Collie, that's awful. I'm so sorry, she said, her eyes big and sad. After a moment, she frowned. He had blue eyes? Yeah, he said again, kicking at stones. Thankfully, Jazz dropped it. Maybe she believed him and maybe she didn't, but it didn't matter, as long as he didn't have to talk about it. As they neared the building where they were to meet Collie's uncle, they looked for his beat-up green truck. Seeing it there waiting just outside the wooden front steps, Collie felt a glow spread through him. Uncle Norbert was his dad's adopted brother, and he had always been Collie's favorite. He'd lived with Collie and his family for a while before moving to Tuck, where he'd become a member of the Canadian Rangers. Suddenly, the building's front door flew open. "Hi, kids!" Uncle Norbert called, grinning. "Ready for some fun?" That's the end of chapter 1. Okay, so the fun thing for me to tell you about Collie and Norbert and Collie's blue eyes. Collie's blue eyes, the inspiration for that came from a fellow that I worked with at CBC Yellowknife, Norbert Poachers. He was an announcer there. He's retired now, but he told me, I think it was an ex-girlfriend of his in Fort Chip when he was growing up had blue eyes, and nobody was quite sure where that came from, but it happened every few generations. So there's an example of how writers can take just a little bit of information and it becomes a seed of an idea that you can use, maybe not in the exact way it happened in real life, but in another way. And it's one of the fun things about writing. Do you write stories? If you do, why not share them? Why not write something while you're home and share it with family members? Try one of these videos. They're not too hard to do and kind of fun. In any case, that's all for today. Enjoy this day, and I'll see you tomorrow.